Hello and welcome to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. I'm your host, Rob Carney. This is a platform to connect with and share the stories of health professionals, entrepreneurs, and personal development leaders who are making an impact in this world. And today I'm joined by my guest, Jake Steiner. So Jake is a semi-retired stock trader and investor. His personal passion, however, is understanding human eyesight. He spent the past 20 years in visual biology science, exploring nearsightedness prevention and reversal methods. Jake hosts the web's largest vision improvement community with many tens of thousands of participants and has written over 1,200 articles on vision biology and myopia control. So myopia is basically nearsightedness. So in this episode, Jake and I go deep. We have a lot of fun chatting about all things nearsightedness and improving eye health and how much this is actually a result of the lifestyle that we're living. I think it's a common conception that a lot of things are based on things outside of our control. And so Jake does a really good job of outlining some basic things that we can do to take back control of our eye health, some basic practices we can utilize, and the way that we can actually improve our vision. And he doesn't like to say the term heal because his argument is nothing is actually wrong with us, and with some little minor tweaks, we can improve our eyesight very significantly. And I want to invite you to stick around to the end where we talk about our sponsors of the show, some of my favorite superfoods, different products that I utilize to optimize my health. And as Jake talks about in here, nutrition is really an important factor in all things health, including the eye health as well. So let's optimize our lifestyle together. Everything is connected. Improve your eye health, improve your nutrition, improve your posture, improve your breathing, and much more. You'll see how all this is interwoven together in this fun-filled episode. I appreciate you. If you do enjoy this episode, please do share with a friend, subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, here is Jake Steiner. Mr. Jake Steiner, I'm happy to have you on the show today. I've been hearing some cool things about you, and I want to just preface this by saying Jake is not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. So the things that you're hearing here, do your own research, play around with them, and see what works for you. But Jake, you are fascinated by the topic of eyesight, and specifically myopia. So I'd love to just kind of have you start off by introducing yourself a little bit and kind of what got you into this world of eyesight. Because again, not being a medical professional and not really having this as your background, I believe you came from a completely different field. I'd just love to have you share the story of what got you to this place.
Sure, happy to. Definitely not a doctor. And I think in this case, in a case of eyesight, I used to have really strong glasses. I was wearing -5 diopter glasses, pretty thick, strong enough to where if you put them down, you're never going to find them again. And it was in my 20s at some point where I went to an optometrist because I couldn't read taxi signs at night. I was traveling somewhere and they said, you need stronger glasses. And I was like, that's just not acceptable. I was a single dude. Thicker glasses, higher diopter glasses make your eyes look smaller. So I had these tiny little piggy eyes and as a single dude, right? Like a vanity. That wasn't cool. Not at all in the profession. And I think that's what enabled me to have an open mind and look at this from a not biased perspective. And for background, I was an analyst at the time dealing with the stock market. And my job was to figure out what's true, right? Like, so lots of stories, lots of marketing, lots of people want you to buy into things. And my job really was to figure out, what's the accounting angle? What is the business background? What are all the things that are the reality of this? So professionally, my job was to ask questions. And when the optometrist said, your eyes got worse, and asked how and why, they said it's a mysterious genetic condition. And that's unlikely, right? Like anybody who's into health and has a reasonable amount of education, you know that human genetics don't change in the scope of 50 years on a global scale, suddenly just making one particular thing about all of us worse. It just seems highly unlikely. And this was all before convenience of the internet. So I went to libraries, I started researching, and I found that the cause of nearsightedness, myopia, is completely well understood in clinical science. And the super weird thing was ophthalmology journals and optometry journals, the journals that optometrists and ophthalmologists are meant to read, like this is their, like professional stuff, showed for the past 50 years what causes myopia. And it's not genetic whatsoever. So that was my starting point of weirdness. And I'd made a lot of money in the market. luckily for me, has had a lot of free time, and I tend to latch onto things that are just questionable, right? And it was one of those things where I went, okay, this is odd. And then I found also, now you can go on scholar.google.com if you just want to find clinical science. You type in pseudomyopia or near induced transient myopia, you're going to get tens of thousands of results telling you really where nearsightedness starts and what retail optometry absolutely doesn't tell us. And from there, I went on a journey to figure out, is this biology flexible? Can I reverse this condition? I started experimenting. Eventually, I reduced my diopter dependence, and then I got friends into it, and then random other people got into it. And today, it's a pretty big international global community of people that are working on improving eyesight.
Love it, man. And so anybody who's just listening, Jake is not wearing glasses right now. So my question for you is, you use contacts? Have you completely reversed the nearsightedness, or where are you at right now with your eyesight?
I shouldn't probably get closer, but no contacts. No, I didn't do LASIK, no contacts, no eye exercises, no eye vitamins. Your eyes are completely healthy. And I highly recommend Google Scholar. Anytime you hear some loon on the internet talk about something that goes against all of non-mainstream, nothing wrong with your eyes. And what I figured out basically is that retail optometry is $100 billion a year business, $100 billion a year. Lenses for glasses cost $2 to $5. So whatever you're paying when you go to the optometrist is largely profit. 5,000% margins are super common. So for me, it was more of a, how do I figure this out? How do I eventually get back to it? And it turned out it wasn't that complicated. And yeah, you're right. I don't need any sort of corrective lenses.
I think coming from the financial background, if you follow the money in a lot of cases, you can often find the cause. So I think that might have served you well in many regards. And so, I'm curious, if it's not genetic, what causes this? I would assume, coming from the holistic lifestyle coach hat that I wear, that it's probably some sort of lifestyle factors. And I would also imagine, probably from what we're doing right now, staring narrowly at a screen has something to do with it. But love to hear what you found to be the cause of all these things, or maybe there's multiple causes.
So yeah, you're definitely right. So glasses were invented by all known information in the 16th century. So it's a pretty old idea. And back then, the only people who had nearsightedness were monks. Those were the only people who knew how to read. And they spent lots of time reading and writing, a lot of time in candlelight. They got myopia. Nobody else did. Fast forward 100 years ago, more people got myopia, but it was still a very small amount of people. And it was just the educated class. People went to school, did a lot of reading. Now, everybody has myopia, and it is close up. And pseudomyopia, if you type pseudomyopia into Google Scholar, it's okay, the short version of the biology, right? There's the eyeball is a fluid-filled ball. In the front is a flexible lens and a circular muscle that controls the lens. And in the back of the eye is a retina where the light focuses. Works similar to a camera. If you look at something far away, that lens is flat, the muscle's relaxed. And the closer you look at things, that lens refocuses the light by tightening that muscle. The closer you look at stuff, the tighter that muscle gets. If you're looking at your phone, right, like super close, muscle super tight. If you're looking at medium distance, like a TV distance, muscle fairly relaxed. More than 20 feet, muscle completely relaxed. What happens, pseudomyopia, completely clearly explained in clinical science, muscle stuck. That's all there's to it. All initial myopia is a stuck focusing muscle.
Is the muscle on the eye, or the muscles attaching to the eye?
The muscles attaching to the eye are the extraocular muscles. They control the eye movement itself. This is a muscle that's internal to the eyeball.
Got it.
It's attached to the lens. It's around the lens. It's a circular muscle. It's kind of cool. And it tenses up and it bulges the lens. And it just stays, it keeps the lens a bit bulged. So it's like if you put your camera in manual focus and you leave it in close-up mode, everything at distance looks blurry. That's what happened to your eye initially.
And, I think it's always interesting too, just for anybody listening, generally speaking, we have the white part of our eye, we have the black part of our eye, and whatever the color is around it. And if you go into different sorts of light, you can see the black part of your eye expanding or contracting. You can see it getting bigger, getting smaller, depending on, where you are at in terms of the lighting conditions. So I think it's important to note that our eyes are adapting to our environment at all times. And so with that being said, like you're saying, it's going to adapt to the lifestyle as well. So if we're narrowly focused and looking at things, and I think we can even look at this from a stereotypical lens of like the nerds in a lot of projected movies and stuff are always wearing glasses. And they're typically the ones, like you said, that are reading, that are, maybe playing video games. And so some of that kind of stereotypical character that we've created in our, TV shows and reality shows may have some scientific background to it, the fact that they are most likely staring narrowly at screens. And so my question is it this, are the screens themselves causing this more rapid, challenge of this nearsightedness, or is it just simply the looking at something narrow? Because obviously when people are reading books, there's no screen, but there's still the narrow looking. Do you think that these screens are, really elevating this rate of myopia?
Same difference. It's the problem is the ciliary muscle, the focusing muscle that's around the lens is tight when you look at something up close. You could be building tiny ships and bottles. You would end up with myopia, quite likely. Like it's not a guarantee, but the muscle's stuck because you keep staring at something super close. It can be anything, especially if that distance doesn't vary, right? Like if you're doing something where at least the distance keeps changing, the muscle keeps moving, less impact. The main problem is just you're looking at a fixed point at a specific close-up distance. Screens make it worse because you spend a lot more time in front of screens. They're a lot more tempting. Books are fascinating, but for most people, it's not as big of an issue as screens.
Right. A trick that I always learned in terms of just eyesight in general, when we're looking at screens, like you said, that we can be on these Zoom calls for hours at a time for many of us. And so the trick I learned is that at least every 20 minutes, look at something far in the distance for 20 seconds. Is there any validity to that? Kind of giving your eyes a little reset like that?
Sure, the muscle relaxes, right? Like that focusing muscle, that's all it is about. I would even recommend hop on Amazon or just print an eye chart, buy an eye chart, print an eye chart, hang it up, and then hang it up somewhere where if you're sitting, you can read the smaller lines. Ideally, it doesn't hugely matter, just context, because the eye chart is ideal because it has smaller lines and bigger lines and bigger lines, so you can gauge where your vision's at. You start out in the morning, right? You're relaxed, you're in good natural ambient lighting. Chart looks pretty good. 3 hours later, after a marathon Zoom call, you will notice the chart looking blurrier. Stuck muscle. Right? You're stuck in close-up mode. And now if you look around the room and you just don't focus on the screen, check the chart once in a while. If the chart looks clearer again, you just relax that muscle. It's like a bathroom scale can tell exactly where you're at with weight. An eye chart can tell you exactly where you're at with the change in your focusing muscle short term.
I like that. And, that just kind of reminds me a big piece of what I talk about with people is returning to our roots and getting back to the principles of nature. And if we were out in nature, we would be doing a combination of looking at things up close and looking at things at the distance. Where in our modern lifestyle, where we're in these little box homes that we live in, we're usually looking at many things up close. There isn't the space for a lot of people to look at the distance. Like for me, the wall is right here, the computer's right here, my notes are right here. This is all very closely, close in proximity to what I'm looking at. And so you think of at a hike, there's a lot of science to say when you get to the top of the mountain, you look out at the vast expanse, it's also stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system. So when we're looking at something close, a lot of times that's stimulating the sympathetic, because kind of that fight or flight, like we're honing in on the target, we're honing in on the enemy, whatever that very close targeted scope is. Is there any relationship to the activation of the sympathetic nervous system in terms of causing inflammation in the body or anything like that affects the eyesight as well?
I don't know. There are lots of things. Eyes are connected to everything. For example, your eyesight is affected by diet. If you eat pizza and drink a big Coke, the insulin spike, again, that eye chart I mentioned, you may notice after the Coke and pizza, when you have an insulin spike, the eye chart will be less clear. So anything can affect your eyesight. Poor sleep, stress, a fight you were in. Mostly it's close up, right? Like the primary issue with myopia is the muscle stuck. And then there is a bunch of other factors that will affect your eyesight. But the main thing really is, if you want better eyesight, you got to spend more time at a distance and less time super close to stuff.
Okay, cool. And so, what are some other things that we can do to kind of heal this? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that may have glasses, and to them, just making this giant jump, like you said, if they take their glasses off, they're not going to be able to see anything. So, what is the protocol that you would recommend for somebody to start from needing glasses, blind as a bat, without them, to getting to the point where you are, where you can actually live your life and not be reliant on glasses?
So the first thing I think super important, not can't heal it because it's not an illness, right? Like it's literally, and I have this debate all the time with people, especially in the industry, of the muscle has spasmed. You're not sick, the eye's not broken. Literally, if you'd go for a hike, the muscle relaxes, your vision's fine again. Your vision gets worse from wearing glasses. So uh, scholar.google.com, because your optometrist is going to fiercely disagree with this, but science is entirely clear. If you type in lens-induced myopia, so short-sightedness caused by lenses, you're going to get tens of thousands of search results of only peer-reviewed clinical science, clearly showing that when you wear glasses, your eyesight gets worse. And I don't want to get into all the long biology of it, but basically is the eye is a fluid-filled ball that the shape constantly is adjusted, right? Because it's never perfect, fluid-filled ball. The retina has a system built into it that checks if the light hits correctly on the retina. Slightly behind it, the eye will elongate. Slightly in front of it, the eye will shorten. Throughout your whole life, till the day you die, it keeps readjusting itself. What glasses do, meant for distance vision, especially if you wear them during close-up, is they cause some of the light to focus behind the retina, right? Because they're moving the light back further in your eye. So your eyeball will elongate. Axial elongation on Google Scholar. When you wear glasses that you only need for distance vision during close-up, your eyesight is going to most likely get worse because the eyeball elongates. So to reverse that, I'm not saying heal, because again, not an illness, but just to reverse it is, don't wear glasses for distance vision during close-up. It's kind of a pain initially. If your myopia is super low, like if you can read your screen without glasses, always take them off. Your eyes will never get worse, right? If your vision's so bad that you need your distance glasses even for computer use, the ideal scenario is getting a supportive optometrist or going online and buying glasses that are like a diopter lower. So now you will see perfectly clear to the computer screen, but you're not going to see that clear at a distance. Much less strain on your eye, less hyperopic to focus. So you're basically getting yourself a pair of computer glasses, less strong, right? A lot less eye strain. Step number one. Step number two is gradually reducing your distance correction glasses. And I'm making this as short as saying go to the gym to get stronger, right? Like this is the super short version of it. But basically, every 3 to 4 months, you can make a very small reduction to your distance glasses that your eyes will adjust to. 3 to 4 months, a quarter diopter lower. In that same span, your eyes will have adjusted. You can see the same line on the eye chart that you could see 4 months ago with the stronger glasses, and you reduce again. And you're making very small, very gradual, very small reduction till eventually, just like me, you don't need glasses.
Very cool. So I got a personal question for you. So I, growing up, used to have 20/15 vision. So I had way better than average vision. My vision was spectacular. And then when I had my second concussion, which was a water skiing kind of a freak accident, flipped over the wave, my skis hit me underneath one of my eyes. Then I got tested for my eyesight and it was worse. And then I then needed distance vision. But I also am curious whether that could have been from the impact of the skis hitting me under my eye, that there's some structural challenges that come up, but I still get double vision when I look at a certain angle from that. But I'm also curious if I just hadn't had my eyes tested in a while, and that, maybe it was 5 years since I had my eyes tested. And so then just from being a high schooler at that time, that maybe it was just me looking at screens more. What are your thoughts on that in terms of, some sort of trauma and, anything healing the eyesight that way?
Trauma is possible. In that case, you can have myopia due to medical conditions, in which case my suggestions don't play a role, right? Like there's definitely a very, very small percentage of people who have eye conditions that are medical conditions. In that case, go see an ophthalmologist, trust their judgment. right? Like this is strictly, lots of people get glasses because they spend too much time in front of screens, easily fixable. If you had trauma to the eyeball that may have caused myopia, ways to check, like they can check the axial length, they can check the corneal topography, like the front of your eye could have been damaged to some degree that causes this astigmatism-like symptom that you mentioned, like where you're getting some double vision, right? Like the corneal surface could have been impacted, and now part of it doesn't reflect the light the way it did before, or refract the light. And now you have this astigmatism-like symptom. Entirely possible, but also well possible if you go to an optometrist, right? And you spent a lot of time close up, like you're in high school. If they put you in a dark room, if they use a projected chart, they don't tell you what lenses they put in front of you. It's very easy. It's very easy for somebody who's got perfectly acceptable vision to appear to be needing glasses, right? Like there's a whole lot of people that you could put a -1 diopter pair of glasses on in a dark room and they would see better, but actually their vision is fine. So that measurement at an optometrist is subjective, right? And again, what I mentioned before, if you had a pizza first, and if you spent a bunch of time reading first, like the muscle stuck, right? Like it's possible that for some period of time that your vision was worse. Impossible to know for sure though, in hindsight, right? Like it could have been either of those things.
Yeah, and so I had glasses for distance because I found that when I was sitting in the back of the classroom that I couldn't see it. And it wasn't that bad. It was never really that big a deal. Even to this day, I haven't worn glasses since high school because I found, like you were saying, that when I wore them consistently, it seemed like my eyesight got worse. And so it kind of just this intuitive side to me. I was like, well, it's not that bad. Like yeah, I can see better, but I was like, well, what if I just move a few desks up when I get to the classroom? Just don't sit in the back of the room. That's kind of really the approach I came, which ended up being a better thing for my academic career because I was closer to the front and actually paying attention more than sitting in the back and goofing off. But my point is that I noticed at a very young age that there was definitely tangible, noticeable in a very short amount of time, my eyesight appearing to get worse from wearing the glasses more and more. And so I basically said, I'm not going to wear these. And of course, then there's the people, parents and stuff saying, oh, well, what about when you're driving if you can't read signs, all these type of things, and kind of like, the worst case scenarios, which is a fair argument, but at the same time, I figured out it was okay. And now years later, and we're talking 10, 11 years later, at this point, maybe my vision isn't perfect, but at the end of the day, I function through everyday life without it. And again, my case is not nearly as bad as a lot of people's, but I definitely attribute a lot of that to, like you're saying, being healthier in general, improving my nutrition, lowering stress levels, not wearing the glasses. But I think it's also looking out at things at a broader scope as well, and being mindful to not spend so much time narrowly focused on the eyesight. So I guess I'm curious, what are some other ways, you're mentioning giving the eyesight a break? You mentioned nutrition. Do you mention or recommend any sort of specific nutritional protocols to help with eyesight, or are you more focused on relaxing the muscles and kind of giving them a break from what they're looking at?
Generally speaking, diet affects everything, right? Like it's super fundamental to your well-being and how well your body functions. That's not my area, right? So I don't really want to speak on things that I don't know enough about. When people ask me eye vitamins, I say get a blood panel, ideally independently from a lab. If you've got deficiencies, correct the deficiencies. Most of myopia, stuck muscle and lens wear. Those are the two things that account for the vast majority of the problem, right? Like address all the other things for generally just a healthier life. Diet isn't going to make or break your eyesight. The thing that will help, like for example, you say you have decent vision, you never got into glasses, which was exactly the right instinct. Sports, especially things where moving objects are involved, right? Like if you pick up tennis or squash or soccer or football, or a thing where you're challenging your eyesight without doing an exercise, right? Like there's a moving object is super ideal because they're coming closer and they're going further away, and you're in a playful state and you're focused on this. Your eyesight will improve if you have that as a hobby, because you buy an eye chart on Amazon right now, and maybe you get, if you're nice natural ambient lighting and you're relaxed and you didn't just look at a screen a bunch, maybe you get 20/20, right? If it's
Mm.
20/25 or 20/30, whatever, still fine. Pick up a hobby that causes 3-4+ hours a week of you replacing that screen time with doing something involving your vision. Keep that eye chart in your office or in your room, and then look at it every month. I promise you, 6 months from now, you're going to read smaller lines that you can today if you have that regular activity. It replaces screen time with something that is fun and engaging and playful, and especially involves moving objects.
I love it. And, even just to that point, it's a big piece I talk about quite often is the importance of play and play in not just the eyesight realm, which is actually not usually the part I'm talking about, but just in the fact of getting out of our heads, getting into our bodies, engaging in something with full presence and having fun. Usually that involves laughing, that involves playing, that involves moving your body, breathing, all these different aspects of optimal health. And now you just add another layer of the pie here that I hadn't really thought about, which is the importance of improving your eyesight and not focusing on these small little screens here. And so I want to kind of backtrack a little bit because we talked about glasses and how that affects things. Is there any difference between contact lenses and glasses? The glasses being further from your eye, the contacts being more directly on your eye. Does that affect anything at all?
It does. And that gets a little bit more complicated because, for one, you get better vision with contact lenses. Number one, closer to your eye, right? So you need less diopters for contact lenses than for glasses, but you also get better peripheral vision. Glasses, right? They draw this line here, so you don't have peripheral vision. Low states of anxiety, it affects your posture and your movement. If you're wearing glasses, when you're walking, you're looking down because you don't have peripheral vision. You can't see what's going on in front of you. People with glasses are always walking with their head down. A lot of people walk with their head down, but you have to with glasses, right? Somebody who doesn't wear glasses, much easier to adopt a better habit of straight neck, looking forward. It affects your social behavior, stuff we talked about before. That whole nerd thing, cause and effect is a question, right? Because you start wearing glasses, you seem like a nerd. And what happens is your neck movement and your head movement and your eye movement is a little weird because you're straight staring through the center of that lens because that's where you get the best vision. So your eyes are being trained to just stare forward. You're not slightly different in your social interaction than somebody without glasses, which makes you seem weird. And
Mm.
that's part of the whole nerd thing, right? So what you were saying before, when you were like, well, I didn't really think of this stuff, affects everything, right? Posture hugely affected. Look at people who work in front of the computer who wear glasses. They're much more likely to be all hunchy and forward. It's never enough with the lenses. Much more common. What I was talking about with walking, social interactions, anxiety, right? Because you don't get peripheral vision. So with contact lenses, a lot of that stuff happens a lot less. So unfortunately, the problem with contact lenses is when you look at a screen or close up fixated, your blink rate is reduced. So you're blinking about 5 times less than when you're in other activities. Blinking delivers tear fluid. Tear fluid is necessary to float the contact lens. So you tend to have drier eyes when you're looking at a screen or reading a book. Add to that, now you have the contact lens displacing tear fluid. Not ideal. I don't recommend people wear contact lenses while they sit in front of a computer for 8 hours. Not great. And then if you Google Scholar corneal thinning, over time, contact lenses tend to thin your cornea, which
Mm.
you need for the structural integrity of your eye. Doesn't seem to be reversible. So long-term contact lens wear is iffy. Optically, and for all the other things we just talked about, better than glasses. Though for what I talk about, like reversing myopia, I prefer glasses because you're more aware of, I'm wearing a crutch on my face.
Mm.
Pop into contact lenses, you're like, nah, I'm fine, right? So
Well, it's funny you
depends.
say that because, as you're speaking about the contacts, I think about a lot of my friends growing up who have had contact lenses and they're always putting drops in their eyes because their eyes are drying out and they're getting itchy. So it is funny how you're saying that makes sense. It's a almost like a protective film that's kind of interrupting the eye's natural process. And of course, it's going to have some sort of effect. And, the symptom of that is the dry eyes. So it's interesting to hear you say that because I'm picturing all my friends growing up who you were always putting these eye drops in because they're saying their contacts were drying out. And then the other thing that's coming up for me is as you're mentioning these different crutches is like what we're saying is we're not getting to the root problem. And that's a big piece of what I do in the work that I do as a holistic lifestyle coach is how can we find the root problem? Because yeah, we can pile on all these cool things. We can add exercise, we can add proper nutrition, proper hydration, all these cool things. But at the end of the day, if we're not getting to the root cause, it's not really going to be a sustainable approach. And so that's what I think is really interesting is changing the lifestyle is really what it comes down to. And sometimes, like you say, cause and effect, hard to know what comes first. Maybe if we change our posture, that may actually help with our eyesight as well. Because I notice, for a lot of us, when you're mentioning people leaning forward, that often leads to mouth breathing, which then mouth breathing, there's a whole rabbit hole of the effects of nasal versus mouth breathing and how that's affecting the body. So it's always curious to me how all these things work together. But a lot of it does stem from our posture, which you mentioned. And I tell people, hey, if you're having trouble with something, adjust the system. Like if your computer screen, you find yourself looking down, raise the computer up so it's a little bit higher. So you're looking more at an eye level with something. And so a lot of times it's all these little micro adjustments within our lifestyle. Like I was mentioning earlier, hey, if you're finding like your eyes are tired of a Zoom call, just look off into the distance for a few seconds every so often. Raise up your computer, maybe dim the brightness a little bit. There's a lot of little things that we can do to optimize our health with the technology. And I'm a big advocate of safe use of technology. We can get into electromagnetic fields and all these other things that they're zapping us with. But I think it's important to note that at the end of the day, we do ultimately have control. And we don't want to fall into the victim archetype of, oh, there's nothing I can do about my eyesight. There's nothing I can do about my health. When ultimately, like you said, maybe we're not able to 100% heal this. Maybe I do have some level of structural damage, but I can definitely say that it hasn't gotten worse. I'm pretty sure it's gotten better over the past, 10, 11 years. But, I'd love to just kind of hear your philosophy in terms of somebody comes to you and they're saying, Jake, look, man, I don't know if I believe this stuff. My doctor said this. They told me I need glasses. And a lot of people really aren't willing to go through the discomfort of doing these little gradual changes, taking the glasses off, not using contacts, because like you said, the posture side, maybe they don't want to look like a nerd because they want to have the contact lenses in. If you just give somebody some very basic steps to start with, let's just say that they want to improve their eyesight and they believe that they can do it. Do you say that if they're using contacts, they should switch to glasses so they can practice that? Do you think that they should switch to contacts so they can improve their posture? I know this is a loaded question, but just curious about first steps for somebody who is ready to change their eyesight, but maybe doesn't know where to start.
Yeah. The first step definitely is the motivation, right? Because it is a bit of a leap and it is a self-experiment. And I'm completely aware how nutty this sounds, right? Like to me, as where I come from, and my parents are both medical doctors, and I am fond of a lot of mainstream medicine, right? Like, so I'm very aware how much this is left field and weird. So first you need motivation, right? You need to go, okay, this sounds a little far-fetched. I'm going to hop on Google Scholar. I'm going to see that the retail optometrist is not telling me the truth about the cause. Number one, that doesn't make me credible, right? But it does question their credibility. So at least now you're closer to being on the fence as opposed to just trusting them. The next step realistically is go on Amazon and buy yourself a measuring tape. Just one of those little soft ones that they use to like cut clothes and stuff, like not a serious, like construction one, but just a soft measuring tape. If you put it next to your eye socket and the other end, either next to a screen or a book, check the distance that you can see clearly, right? It could be, let's use an example. Like you can see, and I apologize, I don't know inches that well, but let's say 50 centimeters, right? Like not quite arm's length. You have the book at 50 centimeters, everything's perfectly clear. At 55, the letters start to be a little tiny bit fuzzy. So you say, okay, at 50 centimeters, I can see perfectly clearly without glasses. Number one, you take 100 divided by that 50 centimeters, 100 divided by 50 is 2. So 2 is the diopter of the glasses that you would need for perfect vision if you can see 50 centimeters. 100 divided by the distance equals diopters. So the moral of that story is you don't need to go to an optometrist to get your eyes checked for distance vision. You just need a 10-cent measuring tape. Eye socket, distance of the book, how far can I see clearly? 100 divided by the distance equals diopters. Write it down, right? Like I could see 50 centimeters right now. Check it after you eat a pizza. And I know you don't recommend people eat pizza, but I know people eat a pizza. See if it's different. Check it in not natural light, right? Like you're indoors, it's some crappy light, it's in the evening, you had a long day, check the distance. It's not going to be 50 centimeters. It'll be 40, right? Check it the next morning when you're all refreshed and you're feeling good, and maybe it's 55. Write that stuff down. And the reason I say it's the first step is because, number one, you realize you don't need the optometrist to check your distance vision. Number two, you start noticing that number is not always the same. And you know this because you're coaching people. It's super helpful to have tangible, not questionable data, right? And the more you do this, and write a little note next to it, like good daylight, ate a pizza, argued with my significant other, slept well, slept like crap. The number will go up and down, up and down. From that, you can tweak small things. You watch Netflix for 4 freaking hours on an iPad, resting on your lap. Check it after that. Now maybe it's less than 40. And then compare that. You binge Netflix at a TV distance, right? Like it's across the room. It's going to be 45. And now you're like, okay, measurably that iPad was really bad for my eyes. The TV was a lot better. You see that number in natural daylight, it's going to be a bigger number. The more of that the more you're empowered to address what's not good for your eyes. And eventually you get to the point where you're confident enough to go, what diopters am I wearing right now? And by those numbers, you'll be able to tell, well, worst case scenario, I need -2. But most of the time, I really only need -1.5. So you hop online or you find a friendly optometrist, you get yourself a pair of 1.5s and see how you do with those. It's the empowerment comes from making little measurements and comparing and seeing how that's not a static number. And from that point on, you're going to be sucked into that rabbit hole anyway, just because you now realize that they didn't tell you the truth and you can easily improve yourself just with small changes.
Love it, man. And that's really what it comes down to. Like you said, is that motivation. That's a big part of with coaching is why. Why do you want to do this in the first place? And starting with that why, starting with that purpose. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the clear vision of what you're moving towards, clear vision, give you some eyesight puns in here. But if we don't have the clear vision what we're moving towards, at the end of the day, something's going to derail you. It's not going to last because there's going to be some distraction. Something's going to come up in there. So like you said, the motivation is key. And that's really what is the decision. I'm going to improve my eyesight. And from there, taking these steps becomes more natural. And everything you just laid out is not really that difficult to do. It just takes a little commitment and consistency, just like anything that we do. It's just, you got to be consistent with it and take your own data, be your own guinea pig. And just like, people have heard me talk about on the podcast before with food logging. When you eat a food, how do you feel after? Same thing with the eyesight. Very similar concept. When you do this, how does your eyesight do? When you do that, how does your eyesight? So I think it's a really, really important piece for people listening that it doesn't need to be overly complicated. And you really can take your own data. Because at the end of the day, I always say studies are great, but a lot of times these studies aren't done with people like you. If it's a study done on, let's just say, a 70-year-old woman from Thailand versus a 20-year-old dude from Detroit, Michigan, those are going to be different demographics. They're probably living different lives. And if we just kind of generalize all these things, those are great to get a good idea of the general population, but then go a little bit deeper and go into your own individual biology, your own individual lifestyle. Because like you're saying, if somebody is watching a TV that's 8 feet away, let's just say, versus an iPad right in front of their face, that's going to make a difference. So I love your approach, Jake. I love all the stuff that you're doing. It's really been a fun conversation for me to learn more about this stuff too. And just reminding myself that sometimes I think I'm like, am I going crazy when I say that I don't think I need glasses? And I think I actually can improve my eyesight without the use of glasses and all these things. So this has been really, really cool to hear from you. And I'd love to hear, what's your focus for 2022? What's on the plate for Jake Steiner moving forward?
Uh, I am still retired, so I'm doing this just because they really hit a nerve with me. The optometry and that professional arrogance telling people that they're genetically defective pisses me off. But other than that, what I did before the current situation was travel mostly. I've got a bunch of sport habits. Like now I'd be kite surfing in Vietnam for about 3 months. Then I'd be in Europe for a while. So I'm hoping to resume some of that. And most of my life really is more focused on experiences than anything else.
I love it, man. We were chatting before we started recording. You're in Thailand at the moment, and that's people who have listened to my podcast before know that's a place near and dear to my heart. So, hopefully we will get back to this traveling. It definitely seems like you got some many adventures ahead of you, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, especially from this place of passion, and just doing it because you believe in it. And that's something I think that we really need more people doing in this world, is sharing messages that they truly believe in with the results that they've gotten themselves, and just keeping to shine that light to show people there is another way. Because yeah, like you said, the mainstream narrative, I'm sure it helps a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people that are not getting the help they need, or maybe actually getting more harm done than good. And it's a fine line. And like you said, with the in the Western medical model, there's pros and cons to it. Absolutely to save lives, but it's also sometimes that it's not so good at dealing with lifestyle factors. It's more focused on acute stressors as opposed to sustaining things in the long term. So if we can find the balance of the two, and like you said, there's plenty of good optometrists out there that are really willing to do this work and help you find the right solution. But I think, from the conversation that we've had, Jake, is that it's also important to note that you can also do a lot of this on your own and really take that power back into your own hands and say, hey, I'm in control of my own health. I'm in control of everything I do, and I have the tools now to figure some of this stuff out and start diving down these rabbit holes. I love to just find a topic, dive down the rabbit hole, and see what I come up with, because maybe it is what the mainstream said, but maybe there's some piece in there that I'm going to adjust for myself. So, with all that being said, Jake, I really appreciate the work you're doing. Where can people get in contact with you, learn more, and follow along?
So endmyopia.org is the website. It's very much a DIY thing. You don't need to buy anything. You don't have to spend any money. There's 1,200 or so how-to guides and articles. There's a big Facebook group. We've got a big forum. We've got a terrible YouTube channel. There's a ton of resources. It'll take you a moment because it's been around for 10 plus years, even the online version. So it'll take you a little bit of time to dig in. But hopefully, especially with a supportive community, you'll have everything you need for better eyesight.
Love it, man. Well, Jake, I appreciate you being here today, and everybody listening. I will put these links in the description box as well. So feel free to check those out. Check out what Jake's doing. And Jake, I appreciate you, my friend.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. Have an awesome day. See you soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast with our guest, Jake Steiner. Really want to encourage you to check out the show notes. There's going to be some more information that Jake had mentioned. You can check out all the good studies he's got, some great videos he has as well, and check out some of the sponsors of this video. Some of the favorite superfood products I've used on the market, my favorite EMF protection with Aries Tech, and you get a discount for all those things, and that helps me keep the show going. That helps us support companies that are making the change we want to see in this world, supporting organic agriculture, supporting the plastic-free movement with Purium, planting trees with Mushroom Revival, and protecting our bodies and our brains from the negative effects of electromagnetic fields with Aries Tech. There's a whole heck of a lot more. If you poke around my website, I have some free ebooks as well. The Yes You Can Grow Your Own Food ebook, the 37 strategies to lower your stress, and the 5 simple steps to improving sleep and reducing stress. Check that out and a whole heck of a lot more. The latest videos go up on YouTube on the Whole Health Connections YouTube channel. So I really want to encourage you to subscribe on there. Subscribe on whatever podcast platform you prefer to listen to. And keep on going. Love to hear your feedback. If you enjoyed this, share with a friend. I appreciate you. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you soon.